Thanks, gang. My name is Mark Angel, and it's really great to be here today to join you guys. A little bit of history. I've done the corporate lifestyle, been with companies, and I've also owned 2 franchises. So I know a lot about what your challenges are. I've been with a really great franchise, and I've been with a franchise that's not been so great. So from what I've seen and what I hear in the industry, you guys are in the right place at the right time. So basically, StairTech. Has anybody ever heard of StairTech before? One back here? Okay. Okay. Well, I'll give you a little information about who we are. We do food safety assessment programs designed to minimize food safety risk, improve customer experience. We've been around since the mid-90s. And what happens is, looking backwards, back in the mid-90s, Jack in the Box had an outbreak. And they could not figure out what was going on. And so basically, there was a federal standard, FDA food standard, for cooking burgers, and there was a state standard. And the state had changed their standard to a higher temperature than the federal standard. And what was happening is the burgers were being undercooked, people got sick, and they died. I think there were 3 people who died during that time period, if you will. So we launched, StairTech's launch back in the mid-80s is a pest control company. Right now, we're the 2nd largest pest control company in the world. We got bought by a company called Rent-to-Kill last year. So what happens is, we're in a customer, and they said, when this whole Jack in the Box thing is happening, can you look at some of these things? And they made a list of things they wanted us to look at. So that humble beginning was the launch of the food service or the food safety industry. So you fast forward, now we've been doing this since the mid-90s. We do about 215,000 assessments a year in about 55,000 locations across the country. So, as you can see, we've got almost 290 full-time specialists now. And as you can see, we are in the U.S. and Canada. We're also doing some other international markets as well. We're in the expansion phase, if you will. So here's some of the brands that we work with. Chick-fil-A's up there. Five Guys is a brand that launched here. We started with Five Guys when they were about this big. And now, obviously, as we work with them, you know, obviously they have a great product, but we've helped them kind of build out and maintain that standard across the country. So, obviously, a lot of great brands, Ruth Chris, Moe's Southwest, Bojangles, you know, a lot of great brands that we work with across the country. So, this is what we know. A lot of companies will launch what we call traditional audit programs. And typically what happens in the traditional audit program, you think of somebody kind of looking over your shoulder, watching to make sure that you're doing correctly. And what we figured out is that is an ineffective model. Because most people, if you're kind of looking over their shoulder, it's just like I was trying to type in the password here. When somebody's watching me type, I'll do it wrong every time. I don't know if it's just me. So anyway, but basically what we found is that the observation model, people don't perform like they normally do. So in that light, if you think about this, most people have a pretty high standard of themselves. But we know that over 70% of our self-talk is negative. Too fast, too tall, too short, too fat, too old, too young, should have done this, should have done that. Okay? So in that light, we take a very unique approach to our food safety assessments. So our model is teaching and coaching, and at the same time, our whole focus is a growth mindset, continual growth mindset throughout the whole process. So, we know that if all we do is tell your guys what you're doing wrong, it's not going to turn out very well. So in that light, here's what we do and here's how we're different. Our goal is to deliver a positive, uplifting experience every time. So when we come and engage with your team, We're going to be engaging the entire team that we talk to, and everything we do is going to be fully narrated. At the same time, we made a strategic approach about 3.5 years ago, and it's called the 6-to-1 positive approach. So we come in and meet with your team. We're going to introduce ourselves. Tell me what you're doing today. And we're going to point out everything they are doing well, everything they're doing right. So when we come across that teachable moment, it's not seen as, I caught you, I got you. It's seen as, oh, I didn't realize that. So one of the big things that we really do is focus on why this is so important. Why this is so important that, it changes behaviors. So our whole goal is to build a better understanding. We're building the trust, the credibility of who we are and what we're doing. And our whole goal, like I said, is to accelerate the improvement of your brand. So we benchmark your results against the industry standard. So like I said, we're doing about 270 brands across the country. And we're going to point out, here's where you're at, here's where the average is, and here's the best in class. And it makes sense when you see this, but what we're trying to do is fully help you focus on the areas that you need to focus on for long-term improvement, if you will. We share best practices from across the industry. In that light, when we come in and we say, hey, I've got a better way, or something you may not have seen before, we're not going to say this came from Chick-fil-A or this came from Ruth Chris, but because we do this in so many brands, we're able to share a better way to cool, better way to sanitize, et cetera, save you time, save you money. So we know that the typical launch is most companies launch like an internal program. There's an audit checklist that they typically are looking at. And the whole goal is to manage the franchise compliance. And we know that, like I said, it typically creates like an us versus them compliant or program. And we know a lot of times if you know that the franchise coach is coming in, you may change the way you operate. You may get rid of things that may not be good or whatever. So our whole goal is to change the trajectory of your program so that you have continual improvement. So our implementation model, when we set the whole program up, we're making sure that all the reporting is set up from the beginning. We are laser focused on calibration and consistency. So John will talk a little bit about that in a minute. The whole positive engagement, teaching, coaching, only on food safety, the benchmarking, the ongoing stakeholder engagement from all the people in your locations. And then obviously the whole goal, like I said, is to accelerate the growth. So what we have seen is the brands that we're working with that have used us for a long period of time, their sales continue to grow and things continue to go well. So a little bit about our specialists. They're totally engaged, heavily engaged, and heavily invested in the program. We're the only company out there that hires full-time specialists. Everybody else is hiring contractors, part-time contractors to come out. So I've got a brand that I met with in Atlanta, and he said the guy showed up every Friday afternoon, or typically on a Friday afternoon about 6 o'clock. So it tells us that he had a 9 to 5, and then he's coming in on Friday afternoon at 6 o'clock. So, but all of our people are 100% full-time salaried employees, and then obviously we've got the credential of the food safety specialist out there. At the same time, all of our people have food, they've come from the food industry. So in that light, we know what the challenges are. We have, they've experienced the day-to-day challenges that you see, the speed bumps, the shortcuts, and so forth. At the same time, we really focus on the interpersonal skills of the folks that we hire. So this talks a little bit about the rigorous training that we go through when we hire specialists. The beginning, obviously, was a 2-week focus. There's an in-field certification that takes an additional 2 weeks. We have advanced training at 6 months. And then there's a certification process that happens at a year. So we're heavily focused on the training of these people, teaching, coaching, and the way they do that. At the same time, we shadow these specialists typically twice a year. And typically that's, that's part of what John is doing in what he does. We monitor the scoring, and I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like in just a second. And if we see anything that's happening and hearing and so forth, we have immediate corrective actions that we take. So this is a bell curve, and it's on its side. And what you see is the green dots in the middle of the curve are typically what's happening, the scores that are taken from our specialists across the country. So if we see the yellow dots that are way out of the box here, or the yellow dots on the bottom of the box are way out, the first thing we do is call the specialist and say, tell me what's going on, tell me what happened in this assessment. So we're trying to figure out, we're trying to give you the same product, whether you're in Charlotte, whether you're in Myrtle Beach, or you're here, or you're on the Outer Banks. We're laser focused on giving you guys the same consistent product wherever you go. So we have a metrics that we follow, and we're always assessing our people to make sure that we're giving you the same product. So the operator experience, we send out a survey typically after we meet with the locations, and you'll see this happen in your locations. But 9.1 out of 10 on overall satisfaction, 4.8 out of 5 on fair delivery of evaluations. The value of the evaluation of 4.7, and then the consistency that we give you is like a 4.6. So we are constantly asking, making sure that we're giving you a quality product and it's useful to you at your locations. So this is a graph of a brand that started with us, and you can see period 1 through period 16. So obviously on the left-hand side, the green scores of the places that scored well initially were down about 20%. And then the locations that scored obviously heavily in the red were, between probably about 70% to 100%. So as they continue to progress and laser focus on food safety and things that made you run a better restaurant, and they came back to your locations on a repeat basis, they continually improved. And that's what I want you to see. So in that light, I want to kind of give you an idea of the process of what to expect when the specialist arrives.
All right, so just to begin with, when the program starts, your first assessment will be announced. We'll set up a date and time with each location for our specialists to arrive. You can have whoever you want to be there. All the people that are going to be running or being the person in charge on a shift might want to walk with the specialist, learn all the things that we're looking for, learn how an assessment goes, go through the whole assessment. Typically, when a specialist comes into the location, they'll walk in, ask for the person in charge, they introduce themselves, introduce SteriTech, ask if the person's ever been through a SteriTech assessment before. If not, they kind of teach them about it a little bit before they get started. They start off by checking the criticals. When they come in, they check, thermometer calibrations, sanitizer calibrations, and coolers or whatever might be in a particular location. Next, they go around and check for, or they ask if anything is going on unusual that day, whether it's equipment issues, large catering orders, those kind of things. Once started, the specialist will engage with the manager. They always ask them when they come in if they have time to walk around with them that day. It's not always required. We tell them it's not required, but we would definitely invite them to walk along with us so that we can coach and teach them the things that we're looking at. The goal there is to teach them what we're looking at, so when we're not there, they can see the same things when they're in the location day to day. All right.
Okay. Let's talk about the Benchmark Food Safety Forum, and we passed this out, and what you're going to see there is we use a form that's based on the FDA Food Code, and we benchmark your results versus other people in your sector, and at the same time I want to talk to you about some of the areas of focus that we're going to be looking at when we're looking at the benchmark food safety form.
All right, so the benchmark food safety is it's based off the U.S. Food Code, right? So that's our breakdown, our interpretation of the U.S. Food Code as we apply it in our assessments. If you look at it, there's three types of what we call observations or opportunities on there. There's priority 1s, 2s, and 3s. Most of you are probably more familiar with the old standard of observations, which are criticals and non-criticals. In 2013, the Food Code changed to a different format for that, so we, of course, go with the most updated version. So looking at the types of observations, priority 1s are the most significant, so you can think of it as priority 1, take care of this as your first priority. Priority 2, take care of this second. Priority 3, take care of that third. And then reporting at the end, our specialists will print out the report for the day, sit down for 10 to 15 minutes and talk over with the person in charge in the location for that day over what all's on the report, how to go about correcting some of the things that were found, and making sure that they understand everything and can explain it to whoever they need to. And then lastly, the last part is a corrective action plan that the person in charge or the general manager of each location will go online and fill out a response with a corrective action for each observation that was found.
So what I wanted to do is show you a report that what the reports look like and kind of what you're going to see and kind of what you expect. So obviously, like John said, probably the assessment's going to take about an hour to about an hour and a half per location, depending on how many questions that happens at your locations. The first thing, like you said, that we do is the first time we come in and engage with your team, we want all the key players to be there. We want, obviously, the franchisee, the GM, you know, if there's a chef or whatever, we want all the key players to be there to make sure that they answer questions and understand. So what happens is you'll see at the top there, it'll say a score of a 16. And to the right of that, it's going to say risk levels. And I apologize, I can't make this really as large as I'd like to make it. But it's going to show how many priority 1s, how many priority 2s, and then how many priority 3s. So if you can think of the priority 1s are something that could lead to a foodborne illness immediately. So that's something we need to address in a very immediate fashion, if you will. The priority 2s, if we don't address that, it's going to, you know, potentially turn into a priority 1, which could lead to an issue. And then the priority 3s, it's going to show that here. So the other thing we're going to do is we're going to tell you everything that you guys are doing well at your location. We point out everything that's happening. And beneath that, you're going to see it's going to say the most urgent issues. Okay, there are no major urgent issues at this location today. On the right there, it's going to show the first score. So they had a 16. Well, let me speak to the scoring real quick. We used to do a percentage-based system, like you could get a 95 or a 98. And when we did that, we figured out that people were like, I'm back in school. I got a 95, I got an A. But you had some critical things that really needed to be addressed. So what happened is we changed it to more of a golf score type program. And in that light, what we're trying to say is, here's the certain things we need to address. We need to, if it's, you know, priority 1s, priority 2s, please make sure that you address this in an immediate fashion. But when you look at the score, the first one would be a 16. So the next time we come back in, it's going to show the next data out there with that score, whether it's a 15 or a 14 or if it, you know, goes the other way. So you can see how you're trending over time, if you will. Okay. Okay, this part of the report is going to show you A131. Hands that may have become contaminated or washed using hot water for at least 20 seconds. And so down beneath that, you'll see it's got a black X in that little box. And it's going to point out, here's what's happened. The employee not washed their hands long enough, only washed them for 13 seconds. And it's going to show exactly where that happens on the cook line. And so typically what's going to happen is if we're in your location, we're going to say, what do you call this area? You know, and so we want to know exactly the way that you look at your location so that when we score it, you know exactly what we're talking about, if you will. So everything that's a black X obviously is something that's been scored. And then, like I said, the A131 is talking particular to that specific food code, if you will. Okay. Obviously, A141, or it says missing damage backflow prevention device in the 3-compartment sink. So we're going to point out exactly what's happened and where it's, you know, where that's at in your location. And then obviously, if you don't have water that's drinkable, you know, it needs to be boiled or whatever. So this is what the scoring system looks like. And obviously, we go from first party to second party. And typically, the first parties are scored at 3 points, the second parties are scored at 2 points, and the third parties are scored at 1 point. So just kind of for the future, you'll know what that looks like. So obviously, we're going to point out things, you know, based on, you know, party 1s, party 2s, party 3s. So as a franchisee, if you've got a GM in that location, you want to make sure they close the loop. If you've got something that's happened, and you want to make sure that you've taken action to make sure that they've corrected that so you don't have an issue. So in that light, okay, what's going to happen when we set this up originally, I'm going to punch this up so you can see it. This is an online report that you're going to receive after that assessment has been completed. Okay? So whether you're an active operator or whether you're an operator who may not be there that particular day, you'll be able to go in after that assessment is done and say, what were the situations that need to be addressed today? So, and at the same time, you're going to be able to assign to make sure that somebody closes that loop, that you've made corrective actions, if you will. So what you can see there is open. Food safety, no certified safety manager employed at this location. And so when you get to the right-hand side, it's going to say expand. Okay, and so in that light, this gives you a chance now to come into this area where it says course of action, and you can type in hired new GM, ServSafe certified, and you can submit that information. Or if you had an employee who should have been there who was not there, you can say, if this GM is not available, to make sure that the other GM is there, you know, when they're out. But what's going to happen is replace GM. Okay. And then so typically what's going to happen after that is you're going to hit addressed. And it's going to submit that so that you can make sure that you're, you know, if you're an owner-operator and you're there and making sure that that's being addressed, but if you're an absentee owner, that making sure that somebody's kind of closing that loop and you're addressing the issues that you have out there. So, and what's going to happen is, on most of these situations, I think we set it up at the 5-day corrective action process. So after we've come in and you see this online report, you know, to make sure that you have 5 days to kind of fix the situation or whatever that might be. Sometimes it may be something like if you've got a under-counter cooler and you have to order new gaskets, and you're going to put order new gaskets, you know, to arrive on Monday. So then it would be like an open corrective action. But the whole idea is we're giving you a tool that you can use to improve your locations, you know, throughout the whole process. The thing that struck me this morning, I was thinking about wherever I've been amazed at, you guys have got a buzz in the market right now. You really do. And I was in Columbia, South Carolina, and I was visiting with a brand there. And he said, tell me what you see out there. What's new, what's different, what's hot? I told him, I said, I've seen this brand, it's up there, and it's just amazing, you know, the people standing out of the door and so forth. And so he called me back the next week, and he hadn't heard of it. And then they'd opened a location in Columbia next week, and he called me and said, this is unbelievable. Couldn't believe, you know. So yesterday I was coming from Charlotte, and I checked in at the TSA thing, and I have all these magnets that I just passed out in my bag. And she's saying, now what are these, and what are they for? And, you know, every time I go through the TSA, I don't know what it is about me. The guy behind me can have a rocket launcher, but they're going to pick me. And, you know, it's nuts. So I'm telling her I'm going to do this kickoff for this brand. And so she said, who is it? I said, Duck Dunner. She said, oh, I love that place. I love that place. So you've got a buzz in the market. But what strikes me is, you know, you guys are all partners. And you're really dependent on your internal team, but you're also dependent on all the other franchisees to maintain that standard. They're getting the same product in Charlotte, Myrtle Beach, wherever they go, Wilmington, they're getting the same product, the same service wherever they go. So in that light, that's our goal. We've been able to help a lot of great brands like Chick-fil-A. We've helped Five Guys grow from a very small brand to a very large brand. And that's what we want to do for you guys as well. So that's all I have, and I really appreciate your time. I think, you know, what we're talking about is food safety. Does anybody have any idea what the number one reason for foodborne illness is? The number one reason? Hand washing? Good. Okay. Norovirus. People get sick. They come into work, and then they pass that out to all the other people. At the same time, we can clean and you can sanitize. So sanitize, the whole goal was to make it where you eliminate the germs. And that's our process as far as calibration, making sure that if we're checking the sanitization buckets, we're trying to help you guys maintain that and understand the importance of that. At the same time, we know that, you know, having what we call TCS food, time-controlled sensitive foods, is something that's potential foodborne illness. But there's so many other ways for potential foodborne illnesses to get into your location. And what we have seen is, you know, to me, it's like you're hiring a personal trainer to help you run a better business. And as we help you focus on, after the first round, we're going to identify the major things that you should be focused on. And so we're taking this from the universe of food safety to personal hygiene, to cross-contamination, to utensils and supplies, things like that that help you run a better location. And like I said, you know, unfortunately, we're in this day and age where, because of the cell phone out there, if somebody has a bad experience, the first thing to do is put it out there on the Yelp. And we know from experience that it's like, I can't remember the exact age bracket, but like 54% of all the people who shop, and I want to say it's between 18 and 28, are looking at Yelp before they go out and select a brand. So like I said, we're all connected as partners. And if something happens in, you know, whether it's California, if something happens in Texas, something happens in, you know, wherever it happens, it impacts the whole brand. It impacts the whole brand, if you will. I mean, obviously, Chipotle back in 2015 had a situation where they had a major foodborne illness. And then in 2017 in Sterling, Virginia, they had another situation happen again. So the first occurrence, their stock took a major dive, public company. And so the second time around, they'd come back and they'd done pretty well. But the second time, it came back, but the stock took another major dive, and now they've got a class action lawsuit because they think that they're not, addressing, food safety is not something they really address, if you will. So in that light, there's a myriad of ways that, foodborne illnesses can come into your location. Our goal is to help you take the universe of food safety and laser focus on the things that you need to be focused on at your location. And at the same time, that as a brand, we are helping you focus on, wherever that location is, we're all in this business together. And because of social media, we really depend on each other. So we've been able to, we do a whole series of programs. Food safety is the cornerstone of what we do. But we also do a program that's called Service Excellence. And so in that light, typically a lot of brands will launch with food safety, and we get this down to a science. I did an industry event in Texas a couple weeks ago called Multi-Unit Franchise Service Operators, MUFSO. And in the first session that we talked about, they called it the top 10 headwinds. The top 10 headwinds. Anybody have any idea what the number one issue in the industry is right now? Employee turnover. Having a hard time keeping employees. They said, and at the same time, what struck me was you can hire an employee, you can get an employee there, but it was like 3 out of 10 are actively engaged at your location. So if you have this issue of employee turnover and you're always hiring employees on a continual basis, we have to kind of up the level of, here's what our standards are. Here's the way we're going to protect our brand and grow this and protect your back pocket, if you will. You've made a major investment in a franchise, and so obviously you want to make sure that you're protecting your brand, by what you do. So in that light, it's like I said, we do a myriad of programs. Food safety is kind of the cornerstone. Customer experience is a big program that a lot of brands will launch after. And if you can imagine, if you're coming to that location, you're looking at it from the customer's point of view. How quickly did it take somebody to greet me? How was I greeted? What's the condition of do I have ceiling tiles that are missing? Do I have a whole series, are the walls cleaned, or the windows cleaned? So that's another program that we can do. My daughter works for one of the Chick-fil-A ministries, and Chick-fil-A has used this for a long time, and they've launched with food safety, but now they've added the customer experience program. And so you hear all the time, how do they get such great employees? They train them. They're positive, they're upbeat, they are, heavily engaged, if you will. And at the same time, we're helping them kind of maintain that standard of, how was I greeted? Was it an upbeat, positive experience? If it was a challenging, how did we overcome that? How do we improve that? So in that way, in that light, you guys have created a buzz. You've really created a brand it's growing very quickly, and we want to help you protect your investment, help you run a better restaurant, help you grow your bottom line. And that's who we are. That's kind of what we do. So we're excited about it, and what's going to happen is as we launch out and do the initial assessments, we're going to notify the corporate office, obviously Sophia and Allie, and they're going to notify you that we're going to be there on next Tuesday, the 23rd at 10 o'clock. And like we said, I highly suggest that you have, as a franchisee that you're there, but you have all the key players there to make sure that we all understand the program, ask questions, ask questions. We love it when you ask questions because obviously we want to help, we want to teach, we want to coach, and that's really what we focus on is improving. And so, so that's the scoop. And then after that, you'll see the reports. the debrief, and then it'll help you kind of close the loop on how we can help you run a better restaurant. So, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So this is a program we talked about a lot internally at the office, and I think it really helps when you take a step back yesterday when we talked about the maturity of a company and where we should be, and from that initial entrepreneur to chaos to functional. And I think this is a next step for us to become a little more functional as a company. And when Russ and I sit around and discuss what would stop the buzz of our brand more than anything, right? If we had a bad customer experience at Mark's store, would that kill us? Well, it might for a little bit. You know, if Brian's employee wasn't great to that one employee, would that hurt Mark's store? Maybe, maybe not. But I got to tell you, if we strike out on some safety issues at Brian's store, that's not only going to hit the D.C. market, it's going to come down to the Florida market. It's going to be in the Cincinnati market. And we made a cost decision. I think the initial assessments are less than $200, somewhere in that range.
Yep.
Okay, it's money. It's true. I mean, it's going to come out of all of our pockets. But what we're going to benefit from this is a little more peace of mind for you as an owner, too, that when you wake up, there's a little more comfort that this brand is elevating. And yes, the Tremers may be doing a great job at theirs, but it gives us peace of mind across the board. So we made a business decision. Is this worth the investment of a couple $100 per franchisee to protect all of us? And I think it is. And look, it's not a long-term relationship. If it's not working out and we don't think there's value, the value is going to have to be proven by the results of these audits, by the results of what we hear back from our franchisees, and then we'll make a continuing, ongoing business decision whether to continue or not. We get feedback that we don't think it's the right project for us, then we pause. But I do think to protect everyone's investment and to elevate this issue across our brand, it was the right move at this time. So I just wanted to chime in that this just wasn't something that, well, let's just put one more program out there and see how it works out, and one more audit that we got to pass. No, this is to protect everybody across the board, and some may be doing it great and some might not, and hopefully this gets a nice standard for us all to compare against. Yes, Katie. I knew I'd have a question from you. I love you. Well, I mean, really, it's going to hit all areas of sanitary and cleaning, right? So, it's a relationship that we want to have them here, talk to them, let them introduce how their program's going to work, and see how it plays out at our locations. No, not a sales pitch. I mean, they did their sales pitching to us a long time ago, and we've had them already at our Mechanicsburg store. They've gone through the audit at our store. They've gone through the results at our store, and we evaluated and thought, you know what, this is a good approach for the brand right now. So, I think the first initial assessment, Mitch, and then one maybe 6 months later from that. So no more than 2 per year, and then we're going to assess if that's even necessary. So that's the way we've scoped it out with them. I don't think it's any more necessary to do than that. And after we go through it a year, if we think it only needs to be one time, then it'll be rolled back to 1. If we don't feel like we're getting any value out of it, it'll get rolled back to 0. So, but I do think we'll all find a benefit from this. And I would like to hear from some people that are operating stores today. The Tremers, I saw you shaking your head. I mean, how much of this is an issue within your store to keep this at a par level? Sure.
Acknowledging from county to state, health department standards can vary, and that is subjective. Have you guys found that we're in lockstep with health department? Are we going to be doing things for you guys that maybe health department?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I appreciate you sharing that. I was there's 38 brands that are based in Atlanta. And so I was talking to a brand there a couple of weeks ago, and they've had 3 health department directors change in the past like year and a half. They keep changing directions. And one time they'll be, we're going to be more grace. We're going to spend more time in your locations. We're going to try to tell you what you're doing wrong. And then the next time they came back, and they in a location that typically, he said, my location was getting a 96, 98 on a consistent basis. We got a 50. So obviously, they're changing courses, constantly. And at the same time, what we figured out is a lot of these people who are being hired by the health department, they're taking a course, they're going and taking a test, they get approved as and then they get hired based on that low credentialing, if you will. And what we have seen is, I had a business that was in a real estate business. It was called Home Investors. We buy ugly houses. Anybody seen that out there? So I bought a Section 8 house, and we had rehabbed the whole house, and you have to have an inspector come out. And so there was it's a purple dye that you put on the plumbing to seal the plumbing. So he came out and he looked at the house, and there was a tiny, tiny dot on one of I put in a brand new linoleum floor. So he said, you're going to have to yank that up and put in cut out this little square and put in another square. And I said, that will change the integrity of the entire location. So anyway, came back for another reinspection, and the guy came in and didn't say a word. Looks great, fantastic, really good. The point I'm making is they were highly subjective versus we're going to be highly objective. And our whole goal is not a personality contest. We like you, so I'll give you a break. I'll give you some grace. We're trying to create a standard, if you will, so that if something happens, we're going to teach, we're going to coach, we're going to tell you, how we can improve this. But at the same time, it's important to your bottom line. It's the safety of your business, and it's obviously, it's like I said, you guys are all linked together. You're all business partners, and if something happens in one location because of social media,